We all know what that means: fireworks, cookouts, and a day off work. But what are we actually celebrating? It's far more than just a birthday. We're celebrating a breakup letter, a rule book, and the audacious, contradictory mindset of the men who wrote them. We're discussing the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and touching on the mindset of the founding fathers. Tonight on Newsworthy, two words and two question marks.
Woo woo! Welcome to the show, fellas. I couldn't do that 3 weeks ago, by the way.
Hey,
That's
yeah.
all new. Look at that. Hey, guys, guess what? We have our original OG guest with us today. It's the 4th of July, so we've got to get
Yes, we
our
do.
pundit, if you will, our governmental wizard in. Mr. Clay Davis is with us. Welcome to the show, Clay.
It is great to be back with you guys, and tip my hat to Jerry because in that introduction that he just read, he made my heart pitter patter when he mentioned that it was one of the greatest breakup letters in all of
I know, I
history.
love that. Yeah.
Is I was just like, man, that's great. Good job, Jerry.
It's exactly
Great to
what
be
it
back,
was.
guys.
This is why Jerry has such a following. He is such smooth and debonair with the wordage.
Yeah, let's go with that. Let's say that.
I am excited to have you, Clay. Clay, it's been too long, man. Too long.
It really
We got a
has.
lot to talk about tonight, but first and foremost, we have to talk about your talented son. He's got a big show coming up in Lexington on July 19th at the Twisted Cork. Is that right?
That is correct. Right here in Lexington, it's a homecoming show. One of the first shows he's done since he left Lexington. So
Dude,
it'll be great,
I'm
great,
That'll be awesome.
great turnout.
I'm
Yeah.
excited. If you listen to this show and want to hear some freaking amazing music, have a couple of good drinks, try to work your way to the Twisted Cork on July 19th. You said the doors are going to open at what time, Clay?
6 o'clock, and he's going to have his full ensemble band with him as well. It's not just a solo show. He's going to he'll have a keyboard player and a drummer, harmonica player, and then he'll play a little harmonica and his guitar as well. So it'll be a great
Freaking
show.
amazing.
Yeah.
Jake has been on our program. We strongly encourage you to check out that program. He did several songs for us on the show. It was amazing. Love him. Words can't express how proud of that young man I am, really. So anyway,
That means a
uh,
lot, man. Appreciate it.
oh, that's the truth. It is absolutely the truth. I talk about him with gushing, like he's of my own. I do. So normally we talk about the mysterious, the macabre, and the out of this world. Every once in a while we take a break to talk about something that's happening or something that's special. This week's the 4th of July. It means a lot to folks. At the end of the show, just to give everybody a warning, I'd like to just take each of us and give one thing that we're thankful about this country. There's a lot. People can depending on what side of the aisle you're on and who's holding what office, there's a lot to get upset about in this country. But all that set aside, we still, in my personal opinion, believe we live in the greatest country God's ever given man. And there's a lot to be thankful for. So at the end of the show, instead of the thumbs up, we're going to go around the table and just give one thing that we are completely thankful for having to do with our country. Is that cool with everybody?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
it'd
So
be hard to pick one. Honestly.
well, absolutely. I know it really is. I can just, we often, and we're going to get into this a lot, according to Jerry's teaser, even. My cousin Jeremy was a class A dude. Loved that kid. One of the smartest dudes I've ever known, ever. Was going to go to school to be a brain surgeon. Was unfortunately lost his life in Afghanistan, but and died a hero. The one thing that I remember most about all of that, I come from a very small town in Kentucky, was during his funeral. How I don't think there was a person who lived in the city or the county who wasn't at the parade to hit procession, not parade. There were people in wheelchairs, there were babies, that was the thing that I took most away from that. How much that community came out and pay respects for that. And a lot of times, we have Memorial Day and that gets glossed over because that's a kickoff to summer, right? But to me, the 4th of July is all about that too. It's about that deep rooted love and the big bird we flipped off to Britain. But I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the amount. I literally cried the entire path from the funeral home all the way to the cemetery. There wasn't an inch of space that there wasn't a body.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know why I brought that up. When I think of America, that's what I think of.
Yeah.
But
yeah. As an American, I'm really sick of people saying how stupid people in America are.
Oh,
Yeah. Personally, I think Europe is the most stupid country.
you
Why is
do?
that? Why is that?
I think Europe is the most stupid country.
That was
That was very
gone,
sly. You slid that one in under the.
you have
Yeah.
been gone for like 17 weeks.
But I told you there's no good ones, and that was about America. So, I was like, I'll try.
That's what got me. I just thought you were continuing the topic.
Right?
That one slipped through the Iron Dome too, didn't it?
Oh, dude,
It was
that
too smart for you Americans. That's
Pretty
what the
much.
problem.
Well, mine's kind of the opposite. I got a new fridge for my wife this week.
Oh, you did?
Oh,
Yeah. Hell of
Really?
a trade, don't you think?
Yeah.
That would reinforce what the rest of the world thinks about us.
Clay hasn't been with us because he has got an amazing promotion. Congratulations, Clay.
Thank
you.
Thanks, guys.
That's fantastic. When
Yeah.
hard work is rewarded with people who pay attention and look at that, that's awesome.
Keeping me busy.
Oh,
Otherwise, I'd be with you guys a lot more often.
we would love that.
Yeah.
We're glad you're getting promotions, but we would love that. That reminds me of something I heard this week. It's very true. Do you know why most people are not hard workers?
Wow.
Because hard work pays off later. Laziness pays off now.
Mm-hmm.
It's very true.
That is
Yeah.
true.
Yep.
Speaking of workers. You know, here at the Newsworthy Studios, I had to fire the janitor the other day.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
he was smoking pot.
Wow.
Yeah. I freaking can't stand high maintenance people.
That's one of your better ones for sure. That was a good one. I liked it.
Terrible, dude. That's just terrible.
I love that one. I read that. I was like, oh, I'm saving that for whenever my buddy Clay is on and he can belly laugh with me.
Glad I ate a couple gummies before I got on here.
You know, it's something I've never done. Of course, I'm still in a position that I can get a random drug test just about any day.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I don't want to go into it. That's crazy.
What is it you've never done? Gummies?
gummy. I love gummy bears, but never with, CB, anything infused in them.
Never. Neither have I. I've never had any of that. Edibles, brownies, none of it.
Really.
Wow.
You're missing out.
I can tell
Oh,
you
here.
one thing. I am so excited though, guys. I found a website you can order sausage.
Okay.
True story.
Sausage?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you guys a link.
Didn't see that one coming. in my
To all
head.
those listeners out here, Steve has been hyping up these two jokes all day.
And we're still waiting for the jokes to.
That was
He
that was pretty,
promised that we were gonna roll over laughing.
that was
You know-
pretty crappy, man. But speaking of crap, poop jokes are not exactly my favorite kind of humor, but they are a solid number two.
That they are. Can't argue with that.
Why can you guys
Sure
not come up with
can.
jokes like that? Gosh.
Actually, I can.
I know you're kind.
I've got one right here.
No, I'm sure you do.
Should I go ahead?
No.
Jerry's crowning.
I've got one. It's about you'll love it. It's about Trump's big, beautiful bill.
Oh, is it?
You want to hear it?
No.
I want to hear it.
Better not.
Oh,
I
now.
used it on Twitch.
We
Terrible.
have standards on our recorded podcast, Jerry.
We were just talking about gummies.
Now, there's a difference between talking about gummies and half of the dad jokes he tries to push through the. He is always pushing that PG like 13 right up there.
Talking about pushing, you wouldn't even let me use the guy that was nice enough to push the bar stool in. You wouldn't even let me use that joke.
I know.
That was a good one too. I told that to Truly, like as soon as you said it, and she was like, "I don't get it." I was like, "Oh my gosh." You'll have
Come
to
on,
tell
guys.
Clay
Okay.
afterwards. Yeah.
So let's get to the topic, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're here. Yeah.
Let's do it.
America.
America.
Oh yeah, today to celebrate America's birthday, I got some Mexican liquor,
There you go.
What?
some good old tequila.
Why?
Cause I just went to Mexico and I was craving some tequila.
Okay. I got some good cold sweet red. Grew in California.
Grew in California.
It's grew there.
It's grew there. That's why America. Listen, you shut your face. Okay. Okay. Clay, tell us about why we're talking about the founding fathers and the Bill of Rights and the.
Declaration of
Yeah.
Independence.
Let's let Clay lead this off.
It's a great time of year for everybody just to kind of, we all, like Jerry said, we get caught up in our fireworks and our picnics and, our get-togethers and parades and all the things that we do to celebrate this holiday. But there's a lot of substance behind it. And it's a great time of year to kind of remind folks or get people to kind of reflect back on what actually happened. What was sacrificed? These guys these founding fathers, they sacrificed everything, their livelihood, their families, their lives, their wealth, their freedom. They put everything on the line. And there's some interesting stories and there's some interesting sentiment and substance and content behind the founding of this country. And it's a great time of year to have a lot of fun with our fireworks and stuff like that. But it's also a great time of year to remember how we got here and the people that were smart enough and brave enough and cunning enough to put a revolution in place. So
Yeah, I think that what you said is so true, because I think that, like, I know for me, where you're taught all of this at such a young age, you just kind of take it for granted. But then when you really start to look into it and to think about what these guys actually went through to revolt against one of the biggest superpowers in the history of the world, and it really is amazing.
And Clay was right. They risk everything. If it had not been successful, the Revolutionary War, if we had not won, they would have, at the very least, had everything they owned taken from them. They would have spent the rest of their life in prison, most likely been killed. This was treason.
Right.
What they did was treason.
Yep.
So they literally risk everything. And we're talking about, in many cases, rich, powerful men
Right.
who didn't need to, weren't doing it for themselves, weren't doing it for their financial benefit, but for the rest of the country, was willing to risk everything for an idea, for freedom.
It is crazy to think how much these people, and not just them, their families, their children, the people, not just, there's so many people that we never heard the names that took care of, Martha Washington while George was out fighting a war, that made sure that she was fed and that that the children had clothes. And, the movie, what was the movie with Mel Gibson?
Like the Patriot.
The Patriot.
Mm-hmm.
That was a farce, but there was a lot of things in there that was historically accurate. It took a village to support just one or two or three of these patriots, because they were off doing, and some of them didn't come home.
Well, a lot of these people, they still thought of themselves as Englishmen. I mean, even just convincing them to join the ranks. I read the book, I don't know if you guys have read it, 1776, and it was kind of just a historical, he just wrote about, how tough it was for, like, even just when they first formed the armies, George Washington was going around, and, you have to feed those people, you have to train those people. All these dudes were like farmers and, just normal dudes. And you have to get them ready to face seasoned soldiers from Britain. And it's just amazing. It's a true underdog story.
Seasoned professionals.
Right.
That's what they did for a living. Yeah. So here's a question I always like to ask. If and this one is for you, Clay, knowing that what we know now as Americans, if there were a threat to our country from outside of our borders, do you think, Clay, that we have enough people left in our country that we could do that without the military? I mean, the military are professional soldiers, but you would think that they would be on the front line somewhere else. If someone were to counterpunch and sneak in people, would it be a Wolverine style? What was the name of that movie?
Red
Dawn.
Dawn.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Would it be a Red Dawn scenario, or would there be even that many people that would protect our homeland?
It's an interesting question. I think if you went back, a few decades, it'd probably be a lot more definitive than my answer now. I would probably struggle nowadays to have a more definitive answer. I'd like to think that we would have, as the Japanese once believed, someone hiding behind every blade of grass in America with a gun to defend the nation. But with the mindset and the physical degradation that's happened with our health as a country, and we're still the most heavily armed, but I don't know I don't know that there's that many passionate patriots. I don't know that there's that many people that would be capable of it without having a complete meltdown. I think there's still a contingency of people out there that could and would. I think there's probably a bunch of people that would want to but wouldn't know how nowadays.
Right.
But yeah, it would have been a much easier question to ask several decades ago. I want to believe that we do, but I can't definitively say that we have the numbers that we once did, or at least as far as being able to put up a viable defense.
I think that a smart country would attack certain areas of the country and say, we're not going to Texas as an example. And we're not going to the deep South as an example.
Well, I mean,
I think you're giving-
eventually they'd have to get there. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
it.
true
You're not just going to have pockets of, incursion and have a successful campaign. I mean, eventually you're going to have to deal with those people out in the Midwest that are sitting there waiting for you. I mean,
The problem with today is the technology makes war completely different
Oh
than
yeah,
it was
Yeah.
back in the
Dude.
50s, 60s.
dude.
It's completely different. You can have a drone, hit someone 3,000 miles away with a missile and have no risk of any casualties. I mean, obviously, drones are expensive, but yeah, warfare would be completely different now than.
Completely agree. All
Yeah,
the
and-
rifles, pistols, and shotguns in Texas and the entire South won't do jack against any modern country's military. Nothing.
So
And I think what you guys are saying is in large part the alarming part about that is a lot of the world has passed the United States by technologically as far as that goes. China is way ahead of us on drones. They realize that probably the next war is going to be fought primarily with drones and with mechanized infantries and things like of that nature. And we have drones, but just not on the scale. And some of the
Normal
more
Americans
recent,
don't have access to that.
even some of the stuff that's been going on in Ukraine and Russia, they're using drones like unprecedented on the battlefield. And we just don't have those capabilities at this point in time. And as modern as a lot of warfare and a lot of modern warfare elements are, there's a small contingency of people that are determined to can hunker down for a long time. I mean, we were technologically superior to the Afghanistan people for 20 years, and they held us off with rocket launchers and AK-47s for a good long while, just because they decided they weren't going away. The Vietnamese did the same thing.
So let's shift gears for just a second. Jerry, tell us a little bit about the Federalist Papers. There's a lot of people that probably don't even know what those are.
Well, if you
They're
want
awesome.
to know, I'm sorry, Clay.
This is awesome. I love talking about the Federalist Papers and
Yeah.
stuff.
And
This is
Clay,
great.
I'm sure knows far more about them than I do. But if you want to know not just what the Constitution said, but what were they thinking? What was
Yes.
the mindset? What did they consider? What alternatives were they looking at? What was the purpose of this? Read the Federalist Papers. That's
Mhm.
where they got together. And the Federalist Papers are a group of essays between, who all was it? Clay, do you remember? 5 or 6 people, right?
Yeah, I think
It was
John
Alexander Hamilton,
John
James Madison,
Jay
and John Jay.
Hamilton,
Yeah.
Jefferson. There were about 5 main players that were in there.
And even until today, for any case that goes before the Supreme Court, and in some cases lower courts, if it has constitutional questions that are ambivalent, that are not exactly laid out in stone, they will go back and begin referring to the Federalist Papers to see not only what did they say, but what were they intending, what was the purpose of it. So yeah, when you want to know what were they thinking, what were they trying to accomplish, you almost have to go back and look at the Federalist Papers.
It's the best way to get context into the way they were thinking.
It
But it was a
really is.
response to the. Okay, sorry.
No, and it explains, just like Jerry said, their mindset, why they set forth to do what they did, and why they debated so heavily and what they were debating. A lot of these guys, there was a general consensus that they all agreed on a lot of major components, especially like leading up. A lot of people don't realize the days from May to July 4th leading up to the Declaration of Independence, the individual colonies were all acting independently, declaring their own independence. Virginia, North Carolina. North Carolina was actually the first ones to do it through the Halifax Resolution. But as in these days leading up, you had guys that were all in agreement that secession from Britain should happen. But what they disagreed on was, should we have a Declaration of Independence first? Or should we have Articles of Confederation first? Or should we go ahead and get some alliances with foreign countries first? And there was an argument about what order of operations, because some guys were making a great case. How can we declare our independence from Britain when we haven't even unified with ourselves yet? And then somebody else would chime in and say, how can we declare our independence from Great Britain when we don't have the support of France or any other country in the world recognizing us as a sovereign country? And how are we going to take on the greatest empire in the world without the backing of at least one other nation in the world? So there were some debates that went on behind the scenes. And as Jerry was saying, in the Federalist Papers, these men, these great men who had these fantastic world-changing ideas, laid all of their thoughts out on paper for us. All of it, every bit of it. We get to peek inside the mindset of genius as this country was coming into its formation. Jefferson lays it out for us. Hamilton lays it out for us. Everything that they were thinking, what they thought about the Constitution, how the country should be formed. What should we have a centralized bank? Should we not have a centralized? Everything. They thought about so much minutia. It was all talked about. It was all discussed. They didn't leave anything aside. It was amazing.
Yeah, and like the Federalist Papers, they actually there was actually people who wrote the anti-Federalist Papers, and the Federalist Papers were a response to that, because I think it was New York and Virginia. They were the ones who was not wanting to accept the Constitution, and so the Federalist Papers were actually published in a newspaper in New York. I think there was 85 papers published between October 1787 to May of 1988. And I want to say this quote from James Madison. This was from Federalist Paper 51. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this: you must first enable the government to control the governed, and then next place obligations for it to control itself. So I think that in the Federalist Papers, they were trying to argue that that they're putting in these checks and balances so that the government wouldn't gain too much control, because the anti-federalists, they were wanting the control to stay with the states. They weren't wanting this big centralized government that they just broke away from. They didn't want the same things to happen. So
they were very fearful of a too powerful
which makes
government.
sense, right? Yeah, you just got rid of a powerful government, and now we're starting this new one. So the Federalist Papers were just these collections of arguments to convince these states that, hey, that we're putting together a government that's going to protect itself.
And one, to steal some of Clay's words, if I might, one that kept as many powers and rights to the states as was possible. At least that was the intent, right, Clay?
That is correct. That
Didn't
is,
end up happening that way in the long term, but that was their intent. There's no doubt that was their intent back
Yeah.
then.
yeah, it was to limit the size of government, and also what people fail to remember is the central government derives its power from the people. We gave the power. We created the central government, and we gave it its power. We can take it back at any time. It was on loan. It was never a permanent granting of power. And to ensure that, the founders wanted a large portion of the power to reside with the states and the several people of the states, because they did have a trepidation or a fear of having a centralized government that was all powerful and making decisions from afar for people on the opposite side of the country that they were out of touch with. Unfortunately, we live in a day and age now where we live in the largest government in the history of recorded man, and unfortunately, the dream that the forefathers had of keeping the government small failed us, and mainly because a piece of paper cannot enforce itself. All the Constitution did was to act as a reminder to the people of what their liberties are supposed to be, so that if in the event a tyrant government did appear, that they would have a friendly reminder that they can take their power back. Unfortunately, the people have failed, and we live in the largest government ever in recorded history, with the largest spending and the largest debt and the largest amount of war, and the largest amount of government employees and government agencies. And I could go on and on about how big this damn government is.
Right.
It was never intended.
Well, the politicians learned what Rome feared. When the politicians can vote them, or when the people can vote themselves a raise, they'll do so. Basically, if the people learn that they can vote benefits to themselves by one party or another or both, um, then that's what they do, because who's promising me the most?
Right.
And that's why we have $36 trillion in debt right now.
And it's, in my humble opinion, why we are in desperate need of a third party, because the
Or
two-party system, or fourth, because the two-party system right now, I think, is happy with things the way they are. One power get the White House every now and then; it'll switch hands. Control of Congress switches every now and then.
Nothing changes.
Nothing
though.
changes.
Elon's quote on Twitter
Isn't it?
was
Love it.
dead on.
About the big beautiful bill, and
Oh
if it
my
passed,
goodness, yeah.
Well,
What do you
no
think,
matter
Clay?
who you vote
How many
for.
parties, without going total parliament style, where you have 60 parties? What's a good number? I mean, in Realville,
Doesn't
no
matter.
third party since Ross Perot. Maybe some can argue Gary Johnson was close until the Aleppo moment, but since Ross Perot, no party's gotten over 15% of the vote ever.
he didn't get 15.
He got he was trending until he dropped out, and then he ended up with like 3 when he came back in.
Ross Perot, he had to
Yeah.
win that, I thought.
Well, no, he was trending at like 15 to 20%. He dropped out of the race, then got back in, and he ended the race in like 9%.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Right
So,
now.
but what do you think's a good number, Clay? Or
I don't-
is 2 good?
I don't think it's really necessary to have someone dictate that. I think the system can. I think just like a free market system can dictate prices. I think the people can decide how many. I mean, if a party, let's say 5 parties start up overnight tonight while we're asleep, and we wake up tomorrow and there's a big campaign on social media and TV and billboards and everything for all these different parties. Well, it just comes down to the messaging and what the substance of the party is. And if the party has a good message that people can get behind, then it's going to be successful. If not, if it's garbage, then it's not going to make it. So just let's have as many. Let's have 100 and put them all out there into the vast market of ideas and let the people decide. Right now, as Jerry was saying, the two parties that we have right now are almost impossible to differentiate from one another, with a few talking points being the exception. But I think when we get down to policy, as you guys were just saying, it never changes. And in the words of the great Tom Woods, it doesn't matter who we elect, we always get friggin' John McCain every time. I mean, that's who we all. Doesn't matter every time.
Well, I mean, yeah, look at this, what's happening now. We were promised reduced spending. We're going to save all this money. And now, yeah, like we were talking about before, the big, beautiful bill. And then also we were promised, hey, we're going to stay out of wars. Look what we're doing in Iran. So here we go.
Yep.
World War III is coming. So.
And there's no way, I don't know how you feel, Clay, but there's no way you can convince me that that was necessary or needed.
Oh, there was absolutely. We're talking about a country that has no navy. They barely had an air force before Israel bombed the shit out of what they had left. And the air force that they had couldn't reach our borders. They were absolutely no threat to us whatsoever. North Korea has a nuke, but when they were developing one, we didn't bomb the shit out of them. Trump went over there and got to be friendly with the leader over there and tried to negotiate his way out of it. But we didn't take that line here with a country that posed no threat to us whatsoever. We went immediately to dropping bombs based on the influence of another foreign country that wants us to work in their best interests. And there was no reason for us to get involved in this whatsoever.
I have 2 points that I want to bring up you brought up some good points, and this is what we're talking about today. So I wanted to bring them up. Point A, you brought up the Air Force of Iran. They are still flying 60-year-old F-4 jets, things we were flying in Vietnam.
Yep.
Point 2, and I'm going to side with Trump on this one. What he did in North Korea was what I want to see out of a president. Let's try something different to see if we have a different result. And I think that, and I may be completely off wrong or wrong, but I thought that if he'd had another 4 years, had we not had the Biden presidency, and I'm not here to debate what happened there, I don't care. But I thought that he was very much on the way of being able to convince the dictator of North Korea that there was a better way. If you take a very rich man and you can guarantee him that he's going to continue his power and continue to be very rich, he's probably going to try to at least continue to listen. The fact that he tried something completely different,
I agree with that.
I appreciate it too. And when you come back, and I can't disagree with you, Jerry was on the receiving end of a very scathing call when that happened. I was like, what the?
And I defended Trump a little bit.
It just blew me away because
Didn't ever need to be there, but
Clay even, you're fine, but Clay even posted how many times has Israel, and I support Israel, as a Christian, it very much says if you stop supporting Israel, bad things are going to happen to you. But this doesn't support them. This bolsters them. And to me, there's a difference. But Clay posted on Facebook, because I follow him very closely. He's like, how many times has Israel, in particular, Bibi Netanyahu, said, they're only a year or two away or 6 months away from a bomb?
it's not just Israel.
Right.
American military has told us that for what, 30,
20,
40, 50 years?
Yeah.
Definitely going back till 1992 for sure. At least that long.
Long time.
Did you guys see the interview or even clips of the interview with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz? Oh my goodness! So Tucker Carlson he was very much against the war with Iran, and him and Ted Cruz. He asked Ted Cruz, "What's the population of Iran?" He's like, "I don't know the population." He's like, "You don't know the population of the people you're trying to wipe out?" I don't know. It was.
It's the same way that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, doesn't know how many Ukrainians have died in the war that he keeps sending money to go kill these young people. He can't tell you. He can't tell you how many of them have died, but he can keep sending money. Yeah. But going back to the nuke thing, the reason why any of these countries want nukes. It's not to start dropping them. Nobody wants that. I mean, the biggest fear we have is that, like anything else, even with surveillance or anything else, that the wrong people get their hands on it. And that's the big fear. But the people that are developing these weapons, they don't want them to drop on people. They want them so the United States will leave them the hell alone. Pakistan has one. We left them alone. India has one. We don't mess with India. North Korea got one. When's the last time we heard a damn thing about North Korea? Not since before they had one. Iran is trying to do the same thing so that Israel and the United States will lift the damn sanctions that's choking out their people, and not allowing them to participate in the global free market. And that's about it. I mean, Muammar Gaddafi gave up in Libya, gave up his nuclear weapon program at the behest of the United States. And what happened to him? He got sodomized to death in his own streets in a coup set up by the United States.
Here's the one thing I have to push back on you a little bit, Clay. Of all the nations out there in the world that I don't want to have a nuke, Iran is top on the list, only because they are a known state sponsor of terror. They formally support Hamas. They formally support.
So does Israel.
the
Israel
Houthis.
supported Hamas, but they have nukes. They have a rogue nuke program that the inspectors aren't even allowed to go look at. It's a top secret. Nobody's supposed to know that Iran has nukes, even though the entire world knows they have nukes. I mean, so
You mean Israel?
yeah, Israel. So I mean, yeah, Iran probably has sponsored some terror. I don't like that, but the only evidence I have to support that they have supported terror is the CIA telling us that they did.
Well,
I mean,
one more quick fact on nukes, and then we'll get back to what we're here for tonight, because we could talk all day about this, and this is what I love having Clay on about. Just you were mentioning that if you have nukes, we're scared about the ones that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Documented facts: the United States has lost 6 thermonuclear weapons over the course since the Manhattan Project. That
Russia's
we have
lost a
no
few
idea, have never been recovered, and we
Yep.
don't know where those are.
Russia's got a few unaccounted for as well.
Exactly. I think their number is like 32.
It's substantial. I don't know the exact number, but it's enough to be concerning.
It's the one thing that if you ever seen the movie or read the book, The Sum of All Fears, the movie and the book are different. The book, it's a Islamic jihad group. The movie, it's a neo-Nazi group that pit the United States versus Russia, and they do so by a rogue nuke that explodes over Washington. It's been put into a vending machine. It comes back that because every single nuke has a like a DNA print from where the plutonium come from, and it came from our place in Atlanta. They had found it. Yeah, it was crazy. Great movie if you've never watched it. Even better book if you've never read it. Check it out. Tom Clancy, Sum of All Fears.
To get us back on track.
Please, thank you, Jerry.
We talked a little bit earlier about how much we had changed from the founder's original intent. Clay, if you would give us a few examples, specific examples of where we at this point are a long way from where the founding fathers intended us to be as far as federal rights versus states' rights.
Excuse me. So many areas. I mean,
yeah,
gun control is just one. The Constitution is very clear that Congress shall make no laws infringing. But yet we have lots and lots of them, and we can debate we could be here for days debating whether we should or shouldn't, whether they're good or they're bad. But if you just don't,
intent as well.
Yeah. You could go on and on, but that's one area. One that is topical may not necessarily be federal rights versus states' rights. issue, but one that's fairly topical and also somewhat bounces off of what we were just talking about. The United States Senate deferring or delegating its war-making responsibilities that are clearly defined in the Constitution as being a senatorial or legislative power have been deferred to the President of the United States in a very dangerous way, in a way that the headlines of the past 12 days should make all of us take pause and say that we need to probably reassess what Congress has done to put this kind of power into one man's hands or one person's hands. That's a glaring shrinkage or aversion from what the founding fathers set forth in the Constitution as far as a federal power.
That was one of the first things I said to Jerry when that happened. Was how does he even have the authority to do that, considering it's not they didn't hit us first.
Mm-hmm. And
One
even
thing you
the
haven't men- I'm sorry, go ahead.
even the what's the thing that happened in 1973 where they actually granted that the War Powers Act or whatever in 1973. Right. You know, there were a lot of neocons and a lot of Trump supporters that were falling back. Well, you know, we've got the War Provisions Act of 1973 gives the president this power. Well, look at that. Just looking at that alone, the War Powers Act of 1973 was unconstitutional in and of itself. It should have never happened, much less any of the stuff that happened during the Patriot Act and all that stuff, where they granted even more power to the president. Yeah, it's the War Powers Act of 1973 is a terrible argument for this because it's not constitutional either. Pure and simple.
What about the 16th Amendment? That's the one that gets to me the most.
What about it?
The fact that wasn't originally, that was the ability for the government to tax our income.
Oh, dude, that's crazy.
Oh, yes. That one, yes. Yeah, thanks, Woodrow Wilson. That was great.
He was a big believer that the Constitution was a living document. He was a big proponent of
Well, it is. They intended for it to be so. They devised a way to amend it. They said, read the Federalist Papers. They said, this is not a finished document. We have to give the people a way to change it as needed down the road. They intended for it to be a living document.
Mm-hmm. But they also made the amendment process difficult. It's not easy. Yes, it's not easy to do, but it can be done, and there's a process for it. There's a process, a mechanism that allows that to be done.
Right. I'm not defending income taxes in any way. I'm just saying.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, Jerry, you love income tax.
Oh, I was going to bring it up. I was going to say, Clay, I can't believe you haven't even mentioned income tax. And this is a huge one with Clay. I'm surprised that wasn't the one.
Yeah, it is.
What do you think the founding fathers would say? By the way, I looked it up. On average, in 1776, the average tax rate was between 1 and 1.5%, with tariffs accounting for the vast majority of that. What do you think those founding fathers would say if they saw our tax system today?
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Well,
can you imagine?
At this point in time, the actual federal income tax itself, they would be completely against it. They would be astounded that we have actually allowed that to happen. I think if a state had a high income tax rate, they'd be a lot more acceptable of that. But as far as the federal government having it, absolutely not.
Can you imagine just, and this is obviously hyperbole. Can you imagine how vibrant and how much of an economic force our country would be if we actually, in fact, had, let's double it, 1.5% for the federal and 1.5% for the state. So a 3% total sales tax or total tax to the American people. How much money, how unbelievably rich would this country be?
We'd have an extra 30, 40, 50%.
now you to play devil's advocate.
Please
If you're
do.
going to drop the tax rates to those points, you're going to have to give up road systems. You're going to have to give up schools. You're going to have to give up most of the
You don't-
benefits that we get from the government today. So my question would be, are you ready to do that? Are you ready for the average family to have to provide for their own educational system, their own police department, their own fire department, and everything that goes with it? You can't begin to cover the majority of the benefits we get on 3% tax.
My question then is, I'm saying that if the rate was 3%,
No, I don't.
that the
disagree.
amount of growth,
I
and this
100%
is
agree.
the argument for the big beautiful bill, mind you. They say that there's not going to be a deficit because, and I am not a proponent of this big beautiful bill. They say, and the thought process is that there's not going to be a deficit because the growth rate of the GDP is going to go up enough to cover it.
How? From what? It's going to go up from, here's my point. Usually people say that when they're trying to get tax cuts approved, and they're saying, if we cut the taxes, here's the deal. This one doesn't involve many new tax cuts at all. All
Yeah.
it's doing is extending old tax cuts.
Making
So
it permanent.
if the benefit was going to be there, it would have already been there.
Right.
This stuff happened 8-9 years ago. Where are the benefits?
Right.
Great
You
point.
can't convince me that it's going to have great benefits because it was there 8-9 years ago.
So back to what Clay originally said with the Second Amendment, that would give me the right to own, if I could afford it, a Sherman tank. Just so you know.
And a nuclear bomb
Okay,
and an Apache helicopter
perfect.
and
I love
machine guns.
Apache.
And that's what I have argued with for years. See, this is one thing where, and I don't know where Clay stands. I kind of get it a little bit from what he said earlier, but you have to remember when in 1776, when they're talking about the Second Amendment, what were guns? What were weapons?
Single shot rifles at best.
But what were they
Shotguns,
used for?
muskets,
What were they used for?
hunting.
No, they absolutely, no one used it for hunting. Why do you think that the military had 100? They were hugely inaccurate. It was, they didn't become accurate enough to use for hunting. So many people think that. The average guy took it out and went and killed squirrels. They couldn't hit a fucking buffalo. They couldn't hit a friggin' buffalo. with it.
Oops, we'll be editing that one out later.
These things were hugely inaccurate. That's why in the Army, you had 20 guys laying on the ground, 20 kneeling, and 20 standing,
Just
and
to
they
get a shot or
hoped
two.
that they could kill one guy.
Yeah,
That was like 20 yards away. They were hugely inaccurate.
before they
So,
became
their
was it
idea of
spiraling? Is that
weapons-
what they called?
yeah, their
Yeah.
idea of weapons was hugely different from today. Now, if they had known the weapons we would have, do you think they would have said, well, you know what? It's a good idea. We should let the average American be able to go out and buy a flamethrower and a tank and an Apache helicopter. Do you think the founding fathers would have said that was a good idea?
I think that they would have known that the people who could afford such things would be able to use them in a very good way.
Oh, like the drug gangs. You're 100% correct. Drug gangs are the only people that can afford it. Clay,
Drug-
what do you think? Would the
Drug
founding
gangs
fathers-
already outgun our police.
Would the
I don't
would the founding fathers have said that that was what the average
I-
American should be allowed to buy?
I think that since the founding fathers put it in place, not so that we could have the right to hunt, but so that we could have the right to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government, I think they would probably be a lot more lenient than we would probably want to believe. I don't know that they would go as far as to let guys have nukes, but I think they would probably be a lot more lenient if they saw what the government was going to roll out to the battlefield. I think they'd probably be a lot more lenient. But that's just me and my libertarian leanings.
I'm becoming more and more libertarian, by the way, all the time.
I think we
was
should all
deviating a
have
little bit.
tanks. I think we should all have killdozers. I think we should all have something in the barn ready to roll out. So,
But here's the point. Like Steve was saying, the people that can afford that is literally the drug gangs. That's the only people that can afford these things we're talking about. So
Yeah.
really, you want to pass these laws and let the drug gangs have
You
Apache
don't have to pass
helicopters?
laws. You just have to repeal laws. There's
All
a
right, yeah,
difference.
and you just have to enforce the ones that were there 200 years ago.
Exactly.
You know how to get rid of the drug gangs?
Do what?
You know how to get rid of the drug gangs?
Legalize all drugs?
All of a sudden, they no longer have the money.
Well,
That's how I
they
do
got
it.
a shitload on
They-
hand right now. I do
the
agree
money's
with
going to the
legalizing
government.
drugs. I agree with legalizing drugs. That's another argument for another day.
Yep.
We'll have to get Clay back for that one. I know where he stands on that. I'd love to hear him talk about it.
Like Ron Paul said, I think he was on the stage one time during a debate, and he actually said, "Yeah, I think that the solution to America's drug problems is we just make all drugs legal." And the crowd kind of went boo and hiss, and then all the pundits, all the other politicians on the stage were shaking their heads. And then Ron Paul gathered himself, and there was a little bit of the audience got calm and quiet again. He goes, "All right, show of hands. Heroin is legal tomorrow. How many people in the audience are going to do it?" Nobody raised their hand. He goes, "What's everybody afraid of?" He goes, "The people that are going to do heroin are going to do heroin, whether it's legal or not."
Amen.
You know, he goes, "Nobody's going to rush out tomorrow and start doing heroin just because it's legal." He goes, "Everybody calm down."
100% agree.
You get rid of the whole oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on the what's the drug they keep getting in cocaine? Fentanyl. You get rid of that
Fentanyl,
problem.
yeah.
You're not having
Yep.
people just overdose on fentanyl because they're doing coke. I don't know. There's a bunch of things that would fix. Wait, so we've talked about like a lot of the issues with the government. I think it'd be good to kind of talk about some of the amazing things we have being in America.
All right, let's start with you, Brett.
So just what our the rights that our Constitution gives us, and that has been upheld since the Constitution was written. So we have the oldest Constitution in the world out of any country. So just looking at the First Amendment, America is the only country in the world that does not have any hate speech laws. Japan is the only other country that does not arrest for hate speech, but they do have hate speech laws. So people could get arrested for stuff that they're saying on social media. Like, I think that is amazing to me. And where we live in America, I could never even imagine that happening. Obviously, there's the whole cancel culture that we've had issues with, but nobody's getting arrested for that. And then the Second Amendment, we've talked about that. Only 3 countries in the world give the freedom to own guns in their constitution: U.S., Mexico, and Guatemala. And Mexico and Guatemala's regulations on guns is a lot more strict than the U.S. So those 2 examples right there, the fact that we can have the right to free speech, and we're not going to get arrested for something we say against the government, or like even just to have this podcast and have this conversation is a privilege that we take for granted so
That much
I
of the
think.
world doesn't have.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
just the other
chances
day,
are
there was
I would not be here with you guys with half the shit I've said prior to even being here. I would have been locked up a long time ago. Enemy of the state.
just as an example, the young lady who got arrested last week for taking off her jihad in Iran in protest, you know, that's crazy. And I just want to throw it out there, and then we're going to get to what we really appreciate. You know, was it 50 years ago? Iran was one of the most progressive countries
I know
in the entire Middle East.
Yeah.
They had, you know, women. They were one of the first countries to give women's rights and the right to vote. And within a generation, they lost all of that. So as great as our country is, we still have to, and I don't want to use the word fight because I don't think that violence is necessarily the answer, but we still have to work really hard to protect what we're talking about here tonight.
Rights are like muscles, Stephen. If you don't exercise them, you lose them.
Exactly.
So it's not necessarily about fighting all the time. I mean, we all talk about revolution and being radicalized and how things need to change. And we talk about these things often, but it doesn't even really necessarily have to come down to violence or fighting or being combative. Sometimes it's just a matter of exercising the rights that we have. And,
Right.
you know, we like to think that the Constitution gives us our rights, but all it is just a written record. The rights that we have inherently come from our Creator. Yeah. And the Constitution doesn't grant those to us. We're born with them. They're natural rights, and they're rights that every human should have. And we're fortunate. We're lucky to be here in a country where they were valued enough to be written down on a piece of paper to remind everybody that it is important, and we do have them.
Well, I will start tonight because I want to take. I want everybody to have their fair chance to say what they love about their country, and we're dealing with rights and the Bill of Rights and the Federalist Papers tonight. I, as dumb as this sounds, and to a lot of people, they're not going to understand this. But if you're in this business with podcasting, or you disagree with somebody, maybe you need to hear this. I value the First Amendment beyond most other of we'll just say the Bill of Rights. And the reason is, and here's the thing that people get wrong with the First Amendment. The First Amendment is not there to protect the majority and the speech that you enjoy listening to. The First Amendment is there to protect the speech that you hate. It is there to protect the stuff that you don't like, the
Amen.
stuff that people will present to you, and you don't have to listen to it, but they have the right to say it. There is not many countries on this entire planet where you can go to the gates of the White House and, if you so choose, scream whatever your thing is, and you have the right to do that as long as you're not impeding someone else's right. That's huge. And like Clay said, if we didn't have that, he probably wouldn't get to join us ever. He'd be locked up in a gulag somewhere. And so many people get that backwards. They get it twisted. They're like, well, I could say what I want, but you can't. That's not how that works. I have the right to say whatever I want. We talked a little bit about it on Twitch about how your coworker has the right to say, hey, I like Grok, without being attacked for it. So that is one of my favorite things that I love about the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. I will also go a step further just to say that at the very heart of most people who were born in this country, I feel we are still one of the most generous, giving, ultimately loving and tolerant people on the entire planet. And I may die 20 years from now or 20 days from now or tomorrow, but I will go to my death believing that. I have seen too much in my life of people who give monetarily, time-wise, talent-wise, of their own free will for no good reason except because that's what they're going to do. And I firmly believe that there are more good Americans than bad. There. That's what I got. Who wants to go next? Jerry or Brett?
Well said,
Will.
man.
I will add something. What you were saying reminded me of a line from a movie. I don't remember the movie, a long time ago. It was some city where martial law had been declared, military was there, and there's some guy screaming at a soldier, and I remember the soldier's response. He said, I vehemently disagree with what you're saying, but I will defend with my life if necessary your right to say it.
Yeah.
And that's very true.
Yeah.
And it's one of the founding principles of America.
Ooh. Oh,
Yes,
no, go ahead.
No.
I was just
All
going to
means.
say, if you ever want to see what it would be like if martial law is ever really declared, the movie The Siege is very good for that. It's super scary of how brutally effective our military, if ever turned against us, really is. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I would further what you said with the First Amendment. My best part of that is freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of assembly. These are the things that hopefully in some small form keep our government honest and accountable. The
They're
freedom of
anchors,
assembly,
too. Anchors for liberty. They're anchors for liberty too, man.
absolutely, they protect it.
Yep.
Freedom of press is hugely important to protect our freedoms and to hold the government responsible. And for those that are saying that we need to strongly crack down. There's been a lot of that talk in the last few years that we need to crack down on freedom of the press. Guys, without freedom of the press, there's literally no one out here holding the government accountable. Without the freedom to assemble, we don't have a right to protest. Now, we often don't like protests when they're protesting something we like. But without that, what happens when 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road, when we've got some leader that's trying to take away our freedom of religion, that's trying to take away our Second Amendment rights? Freedom of protest is what this country was literally built on, and it's extremely important that we preserve the right to it. We were talked earlier about the founding fathers and how fearful they were of a strong federal government that got too powerful. If they felt that way in 1776, how in the world should we feel today? And how much more important are these rights to try to protect us from that? So that
Amen.
would be my answer.
What about you, Brett?
And just to build on that, I think COVID was a great example of how quickly they could take our rights away. Because we talk about the freedom of religion, you couldn't go to church. You know, there was churches. I'm sure there was churches that stayed open, but majority of the churches closed because the government told them they had to. And so that was kind of a scary moment in my eyes. I'm going to change. My favorite thing is a little bit different. I just love the opportunity that our country gives to everyone who is born into this country. I worked at a manufacturing plant for a long time. There were people there making six figures who just had a high school diploma, and you could get a high school diploma for free. You know, the government provides you the opportunity to go get an education, and there's opportunities in this country to make in the top 1% of the world with just a high school diploma. Like I just got back from Mexico, and driving through some of those areas of Mexico, you really appreciate America. I've never seen anything, even the worst areas that I've been in America, we're not even close to some of these areas. I mean, trash was piled up on the side of the road. These people, the houses were like concrete houses with no windows, like rusted metal doors, and it was incredible. Like coming back, it just made me appreciate so much of what we have and the opportunity that we have. I mean, just the fact that I was able to afford to go on vacation. I mean, that's a luxury that we take for granted here in America. So that's what, and I love that my kids will hopefully inherit that same opportunity.
Awesome.
Mr. Clay, how would you answer that question?
I think more than anything, I love what you guys were saying about the importance of the First Amendment and all the critical components that are contained in that vital amendment. But the fact that we live in a place where we can actually affect change on a government that we're not happy with, and that we can take steps to correct it. I think it's sad that we don't have enough people who feel it necessary to take those steps to change things. And I don't think much is going to happen until that time does come. And I think there's probably a chance that maybe not in my lifetime, but possibly my kids' lifetime, they may have to stand up and resist. They may have to stand up and make similar sacrifices that our founding fathers did in order to get our country back on track, to get our country back. I think we've come a long way from what the founding fathers had envisioned, and I don't know that it's necessarily the right way. It's a long way, but I don't know that it's necessarily where they intended us to land. And but I think the tools that they left us, and especially if we go back and we read the Federalist Papers and we go back and we try to get ourselves into the mindset of where their heads were, I think they've left us a roadmap, and they've left us tools to right the ship. And I encourage more people to do that. I encourage more people to take a closer look at the 10th Amendment which is probably one of the most vital of them all. And it's the one that says that the powers that weren't granted, the enumerated powers, the ones you can count them on your hands, on your fingers, the powers that the federal government actually has. It says that the 10th Amendment says that the powers that weren't granted to the federal government default back to the several people of the states. So the power lies with us. And I know we've all probably reached out to a congressman at a time or two. At least I hope you have. I hope you're engaged enough out there in the audience that you're trying to reach your congressman. But I hope you realize how unreachable they are, how unattainable and how walled off they are in Washington, D.C. And I hope that you may have met some frustrations with the fact that you cannot affect change with the people who directly make laws that affect your life. Well, you can do that locally. You know where your mayor lives, especially in small town Kentucky. Every one of you know where the mayor lives. You know where the attorney general lives. You know where your local lawmakers live, where your council members live. And then the ones in Frankfort aren't that too far removed from there. We know where to reach these people. They're accessible. We can influence them. We can contact them. We can make direct changes here locally that affect us a lot more directly than anything they're doing in Washington, D.C. And if we take control locally, and that's here in Kentucky, that's in Tennessee, that's in West Virginia, you guys go out to 50 states and Guatemala and Puerto Rico and every damn where else in the world. We can affect change locally. That's real change. And we start locally, we start branching out. But once we get control of our local governments, then we can do anything we want. We can do anything. The federal government can't, because of the 10th Amendment. The federal government only has so much power over us. A lot of people don't even realize in most counties in America, the most powerful elected official is not the governor. It's the sheriff, the local sheriff. If ICE comes to your state and they want to do an immigrant bust, or if the ATF comes and they want to do a firearms roundup, or they want to do a drug bust, and they're federal agents, the local sheriff has to give them permission, has to give them jurisdiction to operate in that state, in that county. If the sheriff doesn't want the feds there, they can tell them to leave, and they have to. And if they don't, the sheriff is within their right and their power to actually use force to remove the feds from your state. And a lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of power. There's a lot of power in the state, and the sheriffs have a lot of it. But we can affect change locally. And I urge everybody that's listening here, get involved. Get involved in your city government. Get involved in your city council. Get involved in Frankfort. Get to know those people. We can change these people. And they have to be reelected just like everybody else. And that's what they want. They want to maintain power. So use your vote to influence them.
Clay, to what you're saying, you can tell the states that have a high degree of turnout by how different they are. New York, for example, is very much one way because of the people that turn out, versus Florida, which is very much a different way because of the type of people that turn out.
Mm-hmm.
That should show you how effective your local level can be.
Sure. And look at people that left California and they're leaving to go to other places like Texas. Well, those voting demographics are changing now because the people that are moving to those areas are changing.
Yeah.
So it's a valid point.
I'll tell you a funny story off the air about that.
Okay.
Anywho, well, that was weird. Sorry about that. That was an
Clay,
interesting episode, but our journey. Sorry. Clay, I just wanted to say thank you again for coming on and sharing with us and being with the program. Hopefully we'll get to see you again in October. I think that's kind of what we're looking for. And just appreciate, as always, your insight, man. That was brilliant. I couldn't have said any better myself.
I love coming on here and bouncing stuff off you guys, man. And I love how we do our thing, man, and just kind of go around the room and just bounce different stuff around. And we try to set an agenda, and we never adhere to it because it's just kind of a free form, free thought, whatever comes up. And you guys have all got such great stuff to add. You're always so well prepared, and you have it's just very enjoyable to interact with guys like yourselves. And I really appreciate you all letting me come on here and do this. It's big fun for me, man.
Perfect. That was an interesting episode, but our journey isn't over yet. If you stay tuned, we have an exciting bonus story coming up after this commercial break.
Hi, this is Ed Locke with USA Mortgage. When it comes to buying a home, the process can be overwhelming and confusing. With so many options, it can be hard to know where to start. That's why it's important to work with a certified mortgage loan originator. I have the knowledge and expertise to guide you through the process and find the best mortgage option for you. I will work with you every step of the way to ensure that you are getting the best deal possible. So if you're looking to purchase or refinance, please reach out to me at 502-680-0953. So don't take on the stress of buying a home alone. Work with me and I will make your dream a reality. Trust the professionals and make your home buying experience a positive one. MLS ID 448908, DAS Acquisition Company, LLC, doing business as USA Mortgage, MLS ID 227262. This is not a commitment to lend. Additional terms and conditions apply. USA Mortgage is equal housing opportunity.
If you would like to share suggestions for future episodes, an intriguing ghost story, or simply tell us how much you love or hate us, please get in touch with us. You can reach us via email at newsworthywithstephencherry@gmail.com or send us a text at area code 540-709-1318.
And now, back to the story. Guys, I couldn't help but make tonight's bonus story founding father related.
Nice.
By the flicker of candlelight in a modest London townhouse, a storm of secrets brewed beneath the floorboards. The year was 1770. Benjamin Franklin, already a famed inventor and philosopher, was nearing the end of his diplomatic posting in England. His residence at 36 Craven Street looked ordinary enough from the outside, but the cellar told a different tale. Each evening, when the city's lamps dimmed and the Thames mist thickened, Franklin's friend and tenant, Dr. William Hewson, would descend into the bowels of the home. There, in a makeshift lab of sawdust-covered tables and shadowy shelves, Hewson worked swiftly and silently, dissecting cadavers acquired under the cover of darkness. In those days, dissecting humans, dissecting human corpses was illegal, but science waited for no statute. So the bodies came by moonlight, courtesy of grave robbers known as resurrection men. These delivered their grim cargo by the back door, wrapped in a burlap sack still damp with the cold of the grave. Franklin, always one to champion progress, was likely aware, perhaps even quietly supportive, of the feats. He shared the house with Houston, after all, and his curiosity about anatomy and the mechanics of life ran very deep. He once electrified dead animals just to observe their twitching limbs. How different was this? But the risk abounded. Discovery meant ruin. So when the dissections ended, the remains were not carted away, but buried beneath the very floor they'd been studied upon. Skulls with sawn-off tops, femurs scored by blades, bones of men, women, and heartbreakingly, children. Franklin eventually returned to America, where he helped birth the revolution, and the house fell quiet. Over 2 centuries later, in 1998, conversationalists or converse. Oh my gosh, I can't say the word.
Conversationalist?
No.
Conversely.
Thank
Conversely.
convert.
Conversely.
I cannot say this word. Restoring the building cracked open the cellar floor and history gasped. Over 1,200 bones were found, including 6 different children, surgical masks, and evidence of trepanning and early vascular experiments. The newspapers ran wild as Ben Franklin's House of Horrors, they cried. But the truth was stranger and sadder than fiction. It was simply a tale of forbidden silence, silent complicity, and the kind of moral gray zone where progress often begins. No, Franklin wasn't a serial killer, but he definitely lived above some ghosts and might have even toasted them in the name of knowledge. Today's episode brought to you by our great sponsors, Ed Locke at USA Mortgage and Smoking Gun Jerky of Lincoln, Nebraska. Use code Cryptid10 for a great discount. And Jerry, if you can't see the light,
Be the light.